Thank you.
Yep.
So this is the second meeting of the Police Department Building Committee. The first item on our agenda is public comment. As with all virtual meetings, we will take comments from the public by email, and you can email your comments to my town email address, which is simply my name, kevin.moynihan@newcanonct.gov. And if I receive any comments, we will read them in the course of the meeting or before the end of the meeting. So actually, we didn't put on the agenda the minutes, but we do have minutes that Joe Zagorensky was good enough to draft for us. And does anybody have any comments or corrections on the minutes which were distributed with the agenda?
I do not.
Nope. They were good.
Good. If I would take a motion to approve the minutes of the December 17th meeting.
So moved.
Penny moves second. Amy seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. So now I put on the agenda the election of a committee chairman and secretary, but so many people are fighting over wanting to be chairman that I got to resolve this before. So we're going to punt on that until next month. I will be acting chairman for the meeting today. That brings us to, I think Leon's going to lead us through a discussion of the documents that were circulated. So Leon, good morning.
Good morning. So I sent you a bunch of stuff. A couple of the items are just best practices guide from IACP regarding police building construction and or renovation. Stuart sent along an Excel spreadsheet, I believe last week, that had a side-by-side of current space versus suggested space. I think the clearest document regarding needs assessments is the one that was prepared by Brian Humes. And that kind of is a pretty comprehensive analysis and an explanation of the needs regarding space. So I don't know if we want to go page by page on it, but it more or less, it just walks everybody through the building and identified deficiencies that need to be addressed, specifically related to space. One example is when you go in the front lobby, lots of times we get victims or other folks we need to talk to, and there's no real private space unless we bring them into the internal secure areas of our building. So best practice is to put an interview meeting room, a small room at the front of the lobby so that officers can meet with a suspect or victim or whoever happens to be without going into secure areas. And it's also proposing to allow us to do fingerprinting there because we fingerprint hundreds of people a year for various reasons related to permits or financial licenses, et cetera. And we have to bring them in the internal areas of our building usually. So that's a great thing to do and great improvement for our building if we end up doing that.
Hey, Leanne, just to make sure, we're looking at the space needs assessment dated November 2018, right?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
There isn't much that needs to change from that. The thing that's missing from it is a range. So as we talked about last time, current building as is near impossible to do an effective range. If we do end up doing a new building or expanding this building and renovating it, then that's a need, but that doesn't propose it because there just isn't a room for that as is. But note, I'm going to go to page.
Hey, Leon, could I interrupt you for a second? I didn't realize that John had joined us, and I would just want to acknowledge Deputy Chief John DeFederico and express our condolences with the passing of his dad. So, John, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So I'll just kind of go back on track. Note that there's a proposed indoor firearm simulation defensive tactics room. I think this is something we touched on, perhaps maybe not in the meeting last week, but that's a room that's a real need and a requirement given today's environment and the need to train our officers well. And that's a 360-degree room that would have computer simulators in it where we could run officers through both firearms and use of force simulation exercises where they make tactical decisions, and you can critique the decisions and hopefully get them to improve upon how they react to certain scenarios. So that's like a scenario-based training room. So that's a real requirement and a need given all that is going on in our world today.
Hey, Leanne, is that a requirement? I mean, as we go through this, there's requirements
Yes.
and they're nice to haves, okay? So I just think we need to really, we're looking about, a big expense for the town and we
Sure.
want to do it right. And, I just know when Bill and I walked through with you, we just talked about what would you like versus what do you need? So when you say need, I mean, is this like required by whoever decide what the requirements are for a police station? So
No, it's not required, but it's a best practice. And it's from a liability standpoint, it's not a significant investment or expense. It's probably $100,000 to do that room. And given the training value of it, it's a critical need.
okay, but it's 100,000 to equip it, but then it's also adding the space, right? So it's a distinct room, right? It's not a room that's multi-purposes.
I don't think it's going to add to the space per se. It's going to be a multi-purpose room that could be used for a lot of different reasons if it's designed correctly. So, I don't like that either. I don't like a single-use room that's used once a week. So that would be a multi-purpose room where we could do defensive tactics. We could do other kinds of training. We could do the simulation. It's not just firearms either, it's use of force. So, given the need for us to train our officers up to the best we can, that is a critical need. And there's just nothing that's going to replace that. There's a facility in New York that has something similar. It's a private facility, but to my knowledge, there's not anything near us that we could use for that purpose. So
is this something that all the police departments now have? Is this like what Darien has? Is this with the one we went and saw recently? Was it Newtown? I forget the new.
Bethel. No, Bethel has a range, a traditional shooting range. They didn't implement this. Neither did Darien. I think Darien was so long ago, maybe they didn't have the technology wasn't up to date. So it's something that would be well used, and frankly, the training value of it, you just can't really even put a number on it, because it'd be I don't know how to explain it, but it'd be unbelievable for us to have that room and able to train our officers consistently, be able to train them while they're working and run them scenarios. And everybody's familiar with the concept of muscle memory, right? So if you go through a scenario 100 times, the likelihood of you handling well the 101st time, if it's a real scenario, is much greater. So that's why this is a critical need. I'm going to call it that. There's no per se. I'm sure there's certain building requirements regarding hurricane proof, all that stuff, and then cells. There's certain specific requirements, but that happens to be an emerging need, best practice. I mean, if everybody's paying attention to what's going on in our nation with the Police Accountability Act and all the things that are required there, unfortunately, our legislators didn't identify the training deficiencies that officers have, and that should be addressed. But that just happens to be an aside. But so that's that concept. Evidence and property. That's a critical.
Leon, just
Yep.
on that room, because that was like, if you were looking at the two biggest spaces that you were building, that was one of the biggest spaces.
Right.
Is that a room? And maybe at some point we want to have more discussion about that room. Is that a room where you could like trade it for, say, I'll use your firing range and you can use our defensive tactics room, or what would be how would you configure that room? Could you turn that room into a conference room when you're not using it for defensive tactics? What other how would that work, or what percentage of the time would that be used?
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty versatile. I believe, I don't know all the design specifics of it, but I think if it's done correctly and you get the right architect involved, that's thinking outside the box, I do think you could put both this simulation in there. It could be a conference room. It could be a defensive tactics room for hands-on training. So it'd be a well-used room. And, I just can't emphasize enough how important it is given today's environment. They need to train our officers really well. So I think that's an important thing. And certainly we would share it. It's easier to share that kind of room with other police departments. And if we had, excess time, we could share with them. So far, I haven't found any police department in our area that's willing to commit to constant use of their range because of a variety of reasons. So I haven't found that yet. But I think certainly it all depends on what direction we go in with this. If we end up going with a new building, a range makes absolutely perfect sense. Right now, as is, it's just not feasible because of the space, unless we decide to expand and got the entire building from the facade back or something like that. But it all depends on what everybody decides on.
Leon, it appears to me, after studying this stuff for quite some time, one architect has indicated 24,500. Another architect has said 26,000. You're somewhere in between. Do you feel as you look at these two architects' assessments plus your own assessment that the 25,000 number is probably the right number, more or less?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if anybody's walked through our current building, the space isn't used well, but there's more than enough space. So I think there's a lot of efficiencies that could be built in. I think that's a good number.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't want us to be stuck on a building with renovating or not renovating.
Right.
I just, in terms of the actual need, in terms of the spaces that we know that we can identify, 25,000 seems like 25.5, something like that seems like the right number. Is that so? I mean, we can go forward on that basis, and then the next step would be, as we look at the individual rooms and the use of those rooms, there are a lot of terms that are specific only to a police department. And perhaps our next step would be sure that everybody on this call understands what those rooms are, how they're used, and the value of those rooms. And maybe that's what you're beginning to as we dive into the details here. But I think it's important that everybody understands, for example, a sally port. I mean, that's a term that 15 years ago I had never heard before, and now it's common knowledge. But and prisoner processing, well, what exactly, what is that space and what's it do and what's the value, and so just be sure that everybody on the call understands all the use of these spaces, the value of the spaces, and the fact that we are in that 25 to 25.5 range in terms of square feet. Those are two critical items, it seems to me, that we need to agree to. And then from there, we move to location.
Sure.
And if I can just add on to what Stuart's saying, I think we all have to really be able to understand the critical necessity of whatever space we come up with, because on a daily basis at any point in time, it's not like there's a ton of people in the police department, in terms of actual individuals working there. So out from an exterior standpoint, people justifiably will say, why do I need 25,000 square feet when I have, pick your number, what's the average number of people in the building during a shift? 10, 12, and at night, not many.
No.
So I think it's very important that what we define as need is need, okay? And that people understand, because it's a unique building, why we need this much space. Certainly, and also often a lot of the spaces, you don't use it all the time, right? You just use it when you need it. And you sometimes have to, for emergency services, you have to build for need, not use all the time. So I think it's really important for the public to understand why a building that's people have a certain size.
Sure, that's a fair point. To kind of circle back, during the day, Monday through Friday, normal business hours, we could have up to 25 people in the building working. Then you go off hours, midnights or day shift or afternoon shift. Yeah, there could be 8, 10, 12 people working depending on what's going on. So that's a realistic number there. And I agree with you. I think we need to be careful about what we're asking for and give a good explanation about our needs. So I'll kind of circle back. I think the simplest way to explain it is if we go to right after the first, I believe it's a third page in. It's the table of contents. So as I explained, the public area is the lobby area, And that's a real need, obviously, for us to greet the public and handle all the different issues people come in with. And certainly we'd like to make that a welcoming, bright area for the public to come into. It's not so bright and welcoming right now. So that needs to be improved. For going into the community meeting, police training classroom, that's a critical need. Right now, our current classroom is not large enough for the trainings that we need to host. So it'd be great if we could get a larger classroom that could handle the number of people that typically will attend a training. We've tried to host trainings to make it cost effective, and the space just isn't large enough for us to do that. So that's an important thing. And right now, that room also hosts our emergency operations center. I think everybody is going to agree that's a critical need for us. So whether we maintain a shared use platform with that room, meaning emergency operations center and training classroom / community meeting room, and several community groups in the town do use that room throughout the year, not now because of COVID, but that is a pretty well used room throughout the year.
So Leon, in terms of like other people that use the community room, who is it? Are these purposes related to the police, or is that something that could shift to town hall? I mean, I'm not trying to say we don't need that room. You need a room. I'm just trying to really get an idea, not necessarily as to how it's been used in the past, which we need to know but also how we envision it being used in the future.
Sure. And frequently we get a baseball group uses it frequently for meetings. One of the organizations in town, I forget the name of it. Also, it's used by Boy Scouts sometimes. It's also used by a condominium association. I believe it's from across the street that uses the room. So those are kind of the consistent groups that use it periodically. Aside from that, I don't know if you could shift their use or not, but I think if we have openings and the availability for the public to use it, we would welcome them to use it as we have been in the past.
And then we have police commission meetings in there monthly.
That's
and we
right.
have other special commission meetings in there. And occasionally we'll have 50 or 60 people want to be in that room,
That's right.
And
depending on the
certainly
issue that we're hearing.
Right.
Not that we need a room for 50 or 60 people, but we do get crowded, from time to time.
And CERT uses it for meeting room as well as training.
Right. That's right.
So are you envisioning 2 rooms or 1 rooms in the pro forma for a training room and an EOC room, or just 1 room?
I think, I people could chime in, but I think we could still continue doing the dual purpose use, meaning EOC and training classroom and meeting room. I think that's the most efficient use of the space. And I think designed correctly, it would work well. EOC, thankfully, we haven't been had to use it recently, but there's times when we've had it occupied for days due to storms and other events. But I think it could be a shared use space if used correctly. I'm not saying that's not impossible, and that's probably the most logical thing to do.
Okay.
So on these space needs, those were put together as a shared use space, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Now we go down to communications dispatch center. As everybody knows, that the dispatch center runs communications for the whole town. So that's a critical item that needs to maintain, and it's fairly new. So that's good news. I'm sure a lot of the equipment could be repurposed and or relocated if we decide to, depending on the nature of the scope of the project, I guess. Next item is our records division. That's a deficiency. We have records throughout our whole building. So best practice and frankly, a critical need is to have one large record storage room that's secure and monitored. Even though a lot of our records are electronic, we still are mandated to keep hard copy records of certain incidents and arrests and reports for X number of years. So that's why we're kind of running out of room related to our record storage. So I think we could all agree that's an important thing to do and make that more efficient and centralized. So that's an important thing.
Hey, Leanne, is there opportunity with records storage to, and I know you have requirements, how much you keep it, is some of the space need because it's not being kept up with moving it out? I mean, is there, if you're more on top of keeping for a certain length of time, does that minimize your space? Because to quote Tiger, there's never an empty closet anywhere, you know, so someone.
Yeah,
somebody.
I mean, we've been trying to keep on top of purging records when we can purge them, but
Mhm.
there's certain records that we need to keep for 30 years plus. So we can more efficiently start purging records, but there's certain things we just need to keep. And
So you have to keep stuff on site for 30 years? It couldn't be to a storage facility somewhere?
no, I wouldn't want to do that because a lot of them are criminal records. Some of them are personnel records, and the security of it. I mean, I would hate to see some of those records somehow ending up in someone's hands and leaking out. So best practice is to keep that internal and secure in that regard. Next item I'll talk about is our administration. So that's various offices that are required related to our command staff and other folks. Detective Bureau Criminal Investigation. Right now, our Detective Bureau is in a space on our upper floor, and it's not an efficiently used space, and there's a lot of deficiencies related to that that could be corrected. And connected to that is our forensic lab, which is not, it's not quite a forensic lab, but it's an area which would allow our personnel to safely process evidence and analyze things that they are doing now kind of off the cuff, and they have to open windows up to vent out certain hazardous fumes, etc. So that's not a huge space. It's a small space to process evidence and things like that when we do investigations. So that's a critical need right there. Walking down the various requirements, special projects, accreditation, training sergeant, animal control officer. As if everybody's not aware, animal control comes under the police department, and we're responsible for managing that requirement, and therefore our animal control officer is in our building. So that's important for her to have a space here. Then we go to patrol function. So that certainly could be more efficient. That's a shared use space when our officers come in and do reports and have to complete other work. So that could be a shared room of some sort. I mean, I suspect designed correctly, we could do a briefing room that, and along with a report room that's somehow a shared use space, but it's segmented off when it needs to be. So I think we need to, you know, I'm not an architect, and I think we need to get an architect on board at some point to kind of give us the possibilities about how we can more efficiently use the space and make it shared and make it used as much as possible.
Leon, can I just pause you for a quick second? The information technology / computer equipment room, that is a room that it's got a large number of servers. This is just to further dive into that one a little bit. We have our own servers where we have to maintain a secure space for secure records that we are recording. We've got servers also from the state of Connecticut / FBI. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yep.
Which also must be secured and of course air conditioned and supported.
Right.
We also have a very substantial radio closet up in the attic of the building currently, which has to be maintained in terms of temperature and humidity control. And one of the things that I was unclear as to whether your IT room at 300 square feet, according to Humes, was also including the radio room, which has got to be at least 300 square feet up in the attic as well. Anyway, that's just a question that I made note of.
Yeah, I'm not certain if he added the radio room in, but that's a critical thing to include, certainly.
Okay, all right, keep going. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay. And going back to the computer / server room, that's like many many things that were an unknown 30 plus years ago. And it was kind of an ad hoc thing that was built into a storage closet, more or less. And
Right.
it's kind of run out of space, and we had to do some interim fixes because it was overheating and things like that. So that's a critical thing. And it may not, if let's forget which building we end up doing. If we do a new building, if we renovate existing, right now, the current placement of it probably isn't ideal. It's on a main floor, it's in a closet. So that certainly is a critical thing to look at and make sure that that's done the right way.
Yeah, okay.
As important as it is, and it needs to be secure.
And one other note I would make on that is that is a radio transmission site. So there would have to be something if the police station was to go into another location, that site would have to be backfilled or kept live.
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Good point, Joe.
Yep. So number 14 is community emergency response team. Right now, those good folks have a room in our building and use our training classroom, as Stuart mentioned, for various training functions and or when we have live events. And there's really no other space. It just makes the most sense for them to be in our building, given the connection to us and that we typically will call them out for assistance. So that's something important consideration in that regard.
Can I just,
Yeah.
so what's, I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding. You have a CERT response room and you also, I thought they were also using, I thought that was part of 2 and 3.
The CERT room is strictly storage, Penny.
Oh,
Right.
okay. Okay.
Yeah,
It's where we store all of our gear, all of our radios, jackets, et cetera, is stored in the closet.
Okay.
And anything that we can't put outside in a trailer ends up in the closet.
So
Oh,
you're
okay.
looking to have more storage. So that 40 to 230 is for storage, right?
No, I don't know what the 40 is. The 230 is because what Amy, what we also make use of is the EOC closet. Because of our gear is so much, we end up using much of the EOC closet as well. And I don't even think they even have an EOC closet here, do they?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I'm just this line item. So the 40 right now is whatever storage you have. Is this a storage line for certain, not a office? It's like to keep your stuff. Is that what this increased space is projected for?
It's actually not an increased space, Amy. It shows it on this line, but what you have to then also factor in is that there was, I think, a sergeant's office that was turned into an EOC storage closet. And then we ended up taking over much of that storage closet. And I have no idea where, back in 2018, where Humes identified that on this list.
All right. Well, if you go up, the training sergeant number is big, and then it drops to 150 in this. So maybe it's those moving around. Okay.
It may be.
But the function is
Yeah.
storage. The function is storage is what we're looking at, that line item.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Is there any issues with how that storage is accessed, or there portions of the police department building itself that you don't want the CERT people going through, or they have to get at the equipment quickly, things like that?
Bill, you're absolutely dead on. Yeah, that's the challenge for us, is that we want to keep the inner sanctum of the police department secure, and yet we still need to get access to our gear. And so what we've done within the CERT organization is to identify just 4 people who have access to the inner sanctum, and they have the code to get in. Otherwise, no one else gets access. Instead, what we do is we bring the gear out into the training room and lay it out in the training room when we deploy. It's not well designed. Obviously, we can make a huge improvement in this area.
So we skipped over the patrol functions. I've actually, I've actually gone into, I was out on the cover page, but now I'm in the space. So I guess can we shift back up there for a second?
Sure.
So, I mean, one of the problems we have now with the building is that we don't have enough room for female officers. So this, I mean, So this actually is presuming 8 female, 40 male. I mean, are you, if you go with something like this, how do you set this up to allow yourself for maximum flexibility in the future in terms of how you want to staff your areas?
Yeah, I think, I don't, if, like you said, if it's proposing 40 male, 8 female, right now we're at 47, we have 6 female, so and then we're at a high number proportionally to other departments, so I suspect if we were able to hire 8 or bring on board 8 female officers in total, that would be the max. I suspect we
For
would.
the next 30 years? I mean, we're like, this is like a 30, 40-year building.
Right.
I mean,
Right. We could,
I just wanted to know what sort of thinking had gone into that. I mean, do they have, like, a lot of people are going to
Unisex bathrooms, like a
unisex
flexibility in that. Mhm.
right.
right. I mean, so how do you, I guess one of the things I'd like to know, so that, because we want to build it like really well, 30 years, I have no idea what's going to happen. You know, what, how we could be creative there so as to avoid, you know, an issue in the future.
It's a good question. I think that's why it's critical we get an architect on board, and maybe they can come up with some innovative ideas about shared use potentially, or, you know, building in space for the future, et cetera. I think that projection was based on the last 40 years and what we've seen. And we've seen, you know, some increases in the ability to bring on board female officers more so than the past. But I think that was based on a past history and current conditions. So I think one of the 2 architects probably better answer that question and give us maybe give some options about what's been done in other departments that we're able to share use in that regard, and that we're more flexible.
Right. But I mean, in terms of like, you'll need that much locker room space. It's just a question of how you divide it up.
Yeah, that's right.
Or, you know, whatever. And if you make it more flexible, your space needs might increase.
I mean,
Which is not the direction we wanted to go, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, overall growth of the department in the next 30 years, I don't foresee it being beyond 48 or so. I don't see us growing that much based on the population and the calls for service and the demands that we have right now. I don't see anything dramatically changing over the next 30 years or so. So I think that number is right. It's just a matter of allocating male versus female space if you're focusing in on the locker room area.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Sorry.
But this brings up, Leon, actually another question, which is in some ways just absolutely a crazy question. But if, you know, do you envision in the future police departments where, you know, not everyone is wearing a badge, but still using the building, call them social officers or what have you? I mean, as you read the tea leaves, clearly, you know, the way people envision policing is going to be changing going forward. And I have no idea if that means, you know, that not every police person wears a badge. And you know, just getting to, you know, the issue of locker rooms. I mean, do you, which is just a minor tangent off of the overall theme of, okay, maybe there's 48 people wearing a badge, but is there another, you know, in 30 years, are people going to have 30, you know, social, call them social officers that are using the police building for, you know, no other reason than that's just where they're going to put them. What do police chiefs, as you look at your crystal ball, is that something that we should be considering in this space? Because the document in front of us looks at police departments today appropriately. I mean, that's all we really know. But, you know, this again, as Penny's point, this building's going to be with us for 40 years. And so just a few comments on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Based on our calls for service and the needs in New Canaan, I don't see that occurring. I see that more so in the cities where they have a lot of social needs, a lot of homelessness, a lot of calls in theory that could be handled by someone other than the police. We just don't have that volume that would make that logical right now. And I don't foresee that changing dramatically in the future. You know, certainly we have officers that are trained in crisis intervention, and we're able to deal with situations a lot more effectively than ever than in the past. But I don't see us going to a model of social workers responding to certain calls. I just don't see it happening in New Canaan. The bigger cities, absolutely, and it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of, and the reality is the police are called when no one else knows who to call for help. And very often in cities specifically, and in some other circumstances, police were called to situations to deal with that they just weren't trained well enough or should be handling. Should the police be handling homelessness issues? Should the police be handling drug addiction issues and related to that out in the streets? Probably not. But right now I don't see that as something that's emerging for New Canaan. Anything else? I'll keep continue on.
Just on the, so I'm looking at some of the specialty space rooms. So you have your physical training room,
Right.
400 square feet. And I mean, I suppose I'm only picking these rooms because I don't know exactly how they're used and how much they're used. Have you ever done any projections on like for the physical training room, how much is it used now? And obviously, you need one. What are you projecting as use in, like, is it occupied 50% of the time? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, which item are you looking at?
I was looking at the physical training room.
Okay.
And I think that has like enough equipment that you can't combine that with the
Right.
enough special equipment that you can't combine that with the tactics room. But I just,
That's right.
was
Yeah,
curious about that.
yeah, I mean, obviously we want our officers to be physically fit, and right now we have a gym that's got a fair amount of equipment that's in a hallway that was made that way just because there's nowhere else to put it. And we also have a space on our upper floor that's a larger gym-like space that has some equipment in it. So certainly one centralized space, and it is used a fair amount by a number of officers. I suspect if you put a proper physical training / gym in, that it'll be used a lot more. Officers
But
would.
Leanne, you have 3 rooms now, right? Because you have that other room with the mats as well.
That's a defensive tactics room. That's not a physical training room per se. That's just for handcuffing, defensive tactics, which is hands-on training related to taking people into custody, and other defensive tactics like activities. So,
As opposed to a workout room.
yeah, workout room with all the equipment in it, you can't do that because people are going to get hurt if they go down, if they fall, if they get hit. Maybe there's some kind of shared space that you could do a half and a half, maybe, I don't know. But right now we have, like I said, we have 2 ad hoc spaces that are quote unquote gym training rooms that have equipment in them. And then we have that defensive tactics room with the mats in it. But it'd be difficult to share those spaces given the amount of equipment that you have in a room. But that goes back to the defensive tactics / firearm simulation room, that concept.
Yeah, but it is a legitimate question. If you have a bunch of these specialized rooms, but they're used not a lot of time, I mean, it really has to be justified having them in,
Sure.
I mean.
I think we need to be smart about that. We need to go room by room and figure out how can we leverage the use of this space as best we can, given the current limitations of certain things that we do in the rooms, and be smart about that. For example, we could have a conference / briefing room where the officers come in, are briefed, and also it could be used as a meeting training classroom, perhaps, rather than having a single use space that's used, for short periods of time during the day. So this is one of the many things I think we can look at and kind of analyze. And like I said, I think the critical thing is getting an architect on board early so that they can tell us what best practices are, how can we efficiently use the space, and look at things from a different perspective than I don't think necessarily any of us on the call have. So,
you guys, Amy, I know you're hot on this, and I couldn't agree with you more that every space ought to be looked at, thought about, digested, and maybe digested several times to be sure that we've got a really efficient use of the building. And yet there's also a point at which you say, well, you know, if you go through and look at some of our other buildings in town, Saks Middle School as an example, how many hours do we actually use the dining hall? It's 2 hours, maybe 3, and then it sits idle the rest of the day. There's a point at which we say, hey, look, you know, I mean,
Just need it. I get it. I get it.
we just plain need some of these spaces.
But
And,
it takes 4 hours to clean up afterwards.
anyway, like I said, I'm 100% supportive of making sure we have an efficient building. I'm not attempting to argue that point, but we also need to keep in mind that this is a building that gets used 24 hours a day. So go ahead, Leon. Sorry.
That's okay.
Could I just add to that comment? I mean, I think we have to look at which building we're actually going to be in. And then an architect, as Leon mentioned, an architect would come in, they would do test fits of the building. We could then look to combine as many spaces as possible. But I think this conversation might be getting a little ahead of itself, not knowing what space we're going to have.
Right. Yep, that's an excellent point.
Well, so I mean, I think what we're looking at now is not what we have, but we're looking at what we need to provide, you know, New Canaan, so that they are the superb and remain the superb police force, you know, for the next 30 years. So it's basically, it's the needs analysis. And if we determine that it can go into the new building, then that's the old building, that's an option. If we determine that it has to be a new building, you know, I think that's sort of the structure. Nobody's judging that now.
Right. I mean, it just for the point to go back to Stuart's point, I think there was a general consensus between the people that did perform the needs assessment that we were going to need 25 to 27,000 square feet. So if we can cut 10% of that out by combining spaces for uses, I think that's great. But, you know, and we should be identifying those to target now. But we really need to look at the overall big picture before we drill down to start to reduce the space, because we could get into trouble that way.
But I will say, so if I'm looking at the summary page,
What page is that?
22, I think it's 22. So, and I just going back to when we kind of looked at all the town buildings, you know, so it says 13,000 is the net square footage, but the gross factor is double that at 27, which would imply it's using fully in the entire 3 stories of the existing renovated high school, which is now the police department, right? And, you know, I just don't, you know, walking through there and look at some of the things we know are just sized completely wrong, like the Sally Port, that's going to take a lot more space, right? The EOC room is going to take a lot of space. I think we just have to understand, you know, if you were to walk through the building right now, I mean, we all shake our heads and go, wow, there's a lot of dead space there. It's just sitting all around and things like that and not efficiently. So I think, you know, when we get to that point, it's like, all right, we're going up because our Sally Port is way undersized and it doesn't work, right? And, you know, like the IT room, no one expected an IT room. You need that type of stuff. Just kind of, you know, making a very, you know, thoughtful decisions on, you know, as you go up in space. Because, you know, if you walk around the building, you go, there's so much dead space there. What do you mean we need a 24,000 square foot space? I mean, right? But I guess it's because we're saying some of these things are just way super undersized and they add to it.
So just, Stuart, when you did this study, what was the, you know, what did you ask Quincy Holmes to look at exactly? Pure space needs or the ability to retrofit the current building?
I believe both of them were pure space needs, and
Okay.
and Kevin and others can chime in, but I believe it was pure space needs based on a department of 54 employees and the various functions of a police department. What would we need? The first row obviously is I'm sorry, I'm looking at my spreadsheet, Penny. So I mean.
Oh, I like that document. That was a great document.
So that one was the existing square feet, and the other was the proposed square feet. And then I really wanted to do a proposed square feet from Kessel Booz and do so on a line by line basis, but Kessel Booz will combine areas, ill-defined, but combine the areas and describe them in different ways than Hume's. So it was nearly impossible to compare on a line by line basis, though that might be, as we dive into this further, an objective of ours is to define the spaces and ask each architect to please apply their space needs requirement assessment on a line by line basis, so we can see a one-to-one comparison. And hence why when it came to Kessel Booz, all I did was drop the gross square foot at the bottom, which was 19.5, and they used the same gross up factor of 1.35, so they ended up with 26,000 square feet. Anyway, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that's exactly, no, you did. Thank you. Yeah, so you're probably right. We probably need around 25,000 or so square feet.
That was going to be my guess, in that range.
Could I make an observation here? If you look at, I think it's page 27 of the Jakunsky-Humes chart, it says the current usage of 27,000 square feet. Everybody should realize that until about 12 years ago, the police department operated with 7,000 fewer square feet. So it operated in 20,000 square feet. At that time, we built out the third floor for use as the temporary town hall. And then now that that's no longer needed for that, the police department expanded in it. And that's why they currently have this gross to net factor of 2.05.
Right.
It just wasn't designed. There was no design in mind to take advantage of that extra space, and it's not well. I'd just say it's not well utilized right now. So the key thing is to get down to a factor of 1.35. Now we could spend an hour or two talking about whether that should be 18,000 or 16,000 or 19,000. And I think I agree with Joe. This discussion is only going to be meaningful when we have a prototype design in front of us where we can see what proposed shared spaces are coming available and which ones are not. I think we should just accept, I think for now, so we can move on, that it's going to be, 23 to 25 to 27, and that different architects will propose a different solution. It's going to be in that range. And then we can critique it and, drive it down if we feel if it's too much or whatever. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, no, it was helpful to me just to understand how all the various spaces are used.
I agree.
But I agree with you. We can't get too specific on square footage or anything like that now. We just need to understand what the gross square footage need is.
Let me make a comment. I think everyone agrees that the current building has enough space to renovate as a police department. So renovation, we don't have to add on more to that building. We just have to basically blast it out and redo it, which is going to be a $12 or $14 million price tag just to renovate that building. The alternative, and some of us already visited the new Bethel Police Department. The Newtown Police Department just opened in November. They're both 25,000 square foot buildings. They both cost about $15 million. So, we're kind of talking in the abstract right now, but it really helps to go and see what you get for $15 million for 25,000 square feet. And you'll see that those departments made their choices as to what they need, similar to our needs. So I propose that we move on to the issue of, we really have a decision point to make. What would where would we build a new building of 25,000 square feet, and what would that cost? And I want to mention that on Monday I had a conversation with a commercial real estate broker who visited the police department. Stuart, our prior group was plugging in a figure of $4 million for the value of the South Avenue property to sell it to a developer for residential real estate. is probably, it's substantially more than that in terms of value. So when you look at what Newtown and Bethel got for $15 million, which probably could not be built in New Canaan for less than $17 or $18 million. Now, both of those buildings have outdoor parking. But my rough guess is we're talking $20 million to build a comparable 25,000 square foot building with outdoor parking. Yeah, yes. So the question is, do we have a property in town that the town owns? Newtown bought a building and substantially renovated it and added onto it but they had enough property to have outdoor parking. I think for our next meeting, we ought to do two things. One, we ought to tee up the possible locations of a new building, which Stuart has done a lot of work on already. Maybe there's 3, 4, 5 possible locations. And we look at those locations. And then we also analyze the two buildings, the Bethel building and the Newtown building, what you get for 25,000 square feet, whether that would meet our needs, and what would it cost to build that building, a comparable building in New Canaan on town-owned land. So for the next meeting, that would be my proposal. We have two streams of information. One, where would we build a new building on town-owned property? And what would we get for 25,000 square foot building? What would it cost to build a 25,000 square foot building? And using Newtown and Bethel. Leon, we've seen Bethel. I haven't toured Newtown yet. Have you seen Newtown?
I haven't seen it in person, no.
By the way, when we visited Bethel, we talked to the police chief. Their building committees spent months looking at other towns' facilities. And, I think I can't remember the number, but they visited a dozen other police department buildings. Nothing helps in like kicking the tires and looking at what other people who made the same decision as to how much you need for comparable forces. Stanford's building is totally irrelevant to us. It's a $55 million building. And, but I really think in order to focus this discussion about one, should we buy, should we build, or should we renovate? The first project is what would it cost to build new, and where could we build it?
Kevin, I think we ought to augment that slightly. You mentioned that we could just renovate in place. There are two things we could do. One is we could actually build on the same site.
Oh, so that's one of the options, clearly.
Yeah, so we need to think of that. There's another sort of,
but not tearing down the front of the building unless we want to have that conversation.
Right, and then
will the Historical Society have a problem with that?
I'm not sure the Historical Society so much as the sensibilities of New Canaan.
Well, just like the library, it's been.
Well, there's enough land in the back of the building to build a new police department. The question is, what would the front building be used for? It could be renovated at a price tag for the Board of Education.
And there's another variation, which is that the back half of the back wing of the building is very poorly utilized. You could knock off the back of the building and put a substantial addition on there and make a rather tremendous place if that's one of the options. So those are
what we did with Town Hall.
The problem that
the problem
I'm thinking though, so Darien has a 36,600 square foot building. Addition to that's a lot of space, 36, which is kind of nuts in my view. It also cost me $17 million 8 years ago. So they have an oversized building. They have more than they need, and they were willing to spend the money to get 36,600 square feet.
But I think with Darien, what they ran into is the insistence on building addition to where it currently was and keeping the facade of the small old police department. So you end up having really inefficient spaces, which is always the problem when you try to repurpose something. It's not built to what you need. And Kevin, it's interesting that at least in the current market, the potential value of the building, it might be 6 million, because of course that would be something you would net off.
Yeah, higher than that, Amy.
Yeah, okay, whatever. You got to go low. But then, and also, if you're building on town property, assuming there is town property, then that building comes back on the tax rolls. So, I mean, there's the additional potential revenue offset, not just from the dollar amount of the sale, but the future property tax.
Actually, Amy, that's the third work stream for next meeting, based upon what we discussed with this commercial real estate broker, I'd like you and the Board of Finance to focus on what the value is of the South Avenue property to dispose of it.
Yeah, there's a complication which you need to think about. It's not just the raw value of the building. Whatever happens to that building has got to take into account that the ambulance corps has got to be able to come and go, have good ingress, egress, and be able to circulate around the building. So it's not just a piece of real estate that can be viewed abstractly.
And Jim, the other thing is we have to get some indication of P&Z as to what they would allow to build there in terms of the valuation.
Right.
So, but there's enough property there to be able to have the flow for the ambulance corps.
It's complicated, but it would put severe restrictions on the purchaser.
Right.
If someone were to buy it, it would put some restrictions on what they could do with it.
Right. So
Could I make a suggestion that instead of waiting a month, that time is money here? Interest rates are rising, that we meet in 2 weeks and prepare for something like this?
I'm not sure we can get our work done, Paul, in that time. I mean, 3 weeks maybe. I'd be happy to, but I think that we really ought to have a substantive look at and it'll take more than 2 weeks to get that information together. Stuart has some of it already, but I think,
Right.
and I had encouraged people, I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind, the current building has so many deficiencies that we have to either renovate it or build a new building. I encourage you to go over and look at it. Anybody who hasn't been over there, please make an appointment with Leon or John or Andrew to go over and look at it. You're going to come away knowing we have to do something. But I think I'd rather, Paul, have a very substantive meeting in a month and give us the time to work on a presentation that would analyze what you get for 25,000 square feet in New Canaan, what it would cost.
Who's going to put that together?
Well,
when you say we need a subcommittee. We need to form.
Yeah, what's the we? Right.
Well, if you want to have some work streams, but I've envisioned that Stuart, who's our advisor, who's done a lot of work already, and Joe, and Tiger's team would put together a presentation on one, what you get for 25,000 square feet, looking at Newtown and Bethel in particular, and we'll use those as examples. I mean, would those buildings fit our needs? Then the question is where. So the second work stream is where. Stuart's done a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work on possible locations. And third would be the value of the South Avenue property. So to get that done for a meeting, we can't get it done for a meeting in 2 weeks.
So in terms of the other locations, is that work already done? I can understand how the valuation would take some time, but just to understand what the possibilities are. If Stuart's already done, I mean, Stuart, the amount of work that you've done here, I just have to say the data is unbelievable. And this has absolutely jettisoned this committee to a higher spot. I mean, we would be talking now about having our first step, next step being hiring an architect to get the space need.
That's right. That's right.
Already. But if we sort of, look at what's been done and we assume we're in the 25,000 range, we can sort of hold back until we have a little bit more information on that. So I just want to say thank you to you and to Leon and to everybody who's done this tremendous amount. But if you have if you and Kevin have already looked at other locations, then maybe we want to just go ahead and have that meeting to understand it.
That is without question the single hardest challenge I think that we're faced with is location. I had actually gone into the GIS system for the town of New Canaan and looked at every single property that the town owns, and there aren't a lot of choices. There's not a lot of simple, open, flat land, and I had set up a criteria that the location of a police department needs to be somewhat centralized in town, needs to have good access to what I call the double yellows, the major roads, major thoroughfares. It can't be in a residential neighborhood. It can't be in a quiet setting, although the police department is a little quieter than the fire department, for example. It is still a challenge. You want to have a public area You know, once you've got location in terms of geographic location, proximity to the downtown area and to major thoroughfares, then you have to look at open space. We found one which was pretty good, but it was a wetland. There's another one which I thought was outstanding, but maybe a political nightmare from a public perspective, public acceptance perspective. So you go down through and you look at that list, and I would, to Kevin's point earlier, I think maybe what we do is, and I actually mentioned to him this morning, that if we lay out all 3 or 4 locations and we look at the advantages and disadvantages of each location, and then attempt to get public input, because not everybody is going to be happy with the ultimate location that we choose, unless we renovate the existing building. And renovating the existing building, in my opinion, means we're going to be retrofitting a school again to get us a building which again will not be an efficiently used building. I'm personally, I have a prejudice against that, but
And it's a 100-year-old building.
it's a 100-year-old building, and Amy,
And-
you and I have gone through that enough times. It is so inefficiently designed as a police building. It might have been great as a school, but as a police building, it's nuts.
Well, it's not even the inefficiency, Stuart. It's the fact that the bones are rotting away. It's a 100-year-old building. You
Well,
know,
that
there's
too.
moisture, there's all kinds of things. I mean, it's not about the inefficiency of that building. It's about, is it going to be around for another 60 years without having to redo the foundation and redo everything else? It's old.
Right.
And it's not cheap to just keep the facade. It's a very, we looked at years ago, right? To like
Right,
the
right.
idea that we like the look of it, keep the facade. It's incredibly expensive to do that.
Right.
And you have to have the police department hanging out somewhere for 1.5 years while you're doing it too.
Right.
Right.
So let me suggest this. Let's have 3 work streams. I think Stuart working on locations with Jim and Paul working on
Sure.
location.
Which Paul?
Paul Foley.
Okay.
Amy.
I was trying to give it to Tully.
No, Amy and Michael, no, locations is Amy and Michael Chen and Bill work on what you get for 25,000 square feet, like Bethel and Newtown. And then Amy, Michael, and Bill working on what the value of the South Avenue property is. And then Paul Tully and who else? Penny and myself working on what you get for 25,000 square feet, looking at Bethel and Newtown as examples. And whether that meets our space needs. I mean, would those buildings be big enough at 25,000 square feet for what we want? Now, Bethel has a firing range, Newtown doesn't. They have a firing range, which is a shell of a building without having fitted it out. They need another $600,000 to make it a firing range. So we'll have those 3 work streams. We'll bring them back in a month. There's a lot of work to get done in order to put a package together, and that'll be a very substantive meeting. Locations and what you get for 25,000 square feet. Does that meet our needs? Bethel, Newtown, and the value of the South Avenue property. We bring those 3 together for our next meeting.
And to get the tours of those buildings, Leon, I assume you're the person that reaches out to their police department for some possible times and dates?
Sure, I'll make it happen.
Yeah, because I think we should all, if we can, get through there all at the same time or relatively, within 1 or 2 days of each other, rather than having a steady stream of one-offs up there.
Yeah. So we'll work with Leon in terms of
Good.
scheduling a site visit to Newtown and
So
Bethel.
just in terms of the site visit to Newtown, I don't know, I'm headed to Florida. I'm not sure when. I know I'm going to be here next week. Paul, would you have a chance in your schedule next week to see Newtown if we could arrange a tour that quickly? It sounds like Newtown is the best example of what we would get.
They're very comparable in terms of, but Bethel and Newtown are very comparable. We can arrange a tour before you leave, Penny, for Newtown.
Sure.
The
Hey,
first-
Kevin,
Yeah.
Kevin,
Or,
with
or
the-
is that, Paul, is that good for you too?
I'm available. Yes.
Okay.
Kevin,
So
with
that's
the
a
new-
little fast, so I wanted to mention it.
Amy and Michael and Stuart and Leon and I have all been up to Bethel. I haven't been to Newtown, so
So Kevin, do you,
I'm actually-
for the Newtown one, the cost of construction, did they own the land? Is that just the
no, they
construction cost?
they had to buy it. It was a printing plant. They bought the building and the land.
Okay, so is that number?
I don't know whether,
The
it says
land
50
purchase or-
it says
yeah.
$50 million was the project cost. I don't know if that includes the cost of buying the building.
Okay, cool.
Very good.
I'm actually in town next week. So if Paul and Jim.
Yeah, good.
Get together and drive around to some of the locations, I'm happy to show them to you.
And I'd love
Let's
to
do
be
that.
part of that as well. I'm around next week.
Okay, so we'll come back to you all and at least with the site visits and also then work streams as far as what we're trying to accomplish. Joe and Tiger and I will work with each team to make sure we know what our schedule is, what we have to get done.
Good.
So I think that
Good.
probably covers what we wanted to cover today. Is there anybody?
Yeah, I think there's enough work to do that if we just do this work well and get together in the next regular scheduled meeting, that should be good enough.
Who was on the valuation with me?
Chen and me,
Mike,
Michael Chen and me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy.
and I'll go back to Joe to make sure we know which groups. If I missed any, I don't think I missed anybody in terms of being at one of the work streams. If I did, we'll call you.
Very good.
All right.
All right.
Yep.
Meeting-
Thanks.
So for today, I think we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, and thank you all. And
Okay.
we'll see you in a month.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leon.
Sure, good night.
bye.
Thank you.